Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us at the FreightWaves Health and Pharma Supply Chain Summit. My name is Patrick Duffy. I'm the president of the Blockchain and Transport Alliance, BiTA, and I'm joined today with Susanne Somerville, who is the CEO of Chronicled. Chronicled is the custodian of MediLedger, and today we're going to be discussing the state of enterprise blockchain. There's been a lot of press in the news recently about enterprise blockchain being dead, and so I think we're going to have an interesting conversation that is potentially going to debunk that headline and talk about what opportunities and challenges are coming out of the pandemic. So, Susanne, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you fill us in on your background?
Yeah, thank you so much, Patrick, for having me. As you noted, I'm CEO of Chronicled. We're tackling enterprise blockchain solutions in the life sciences industry with an aim to really build the next generation industry network. But my prior experience was actually not in technology, but running supply chain for a major pharmaceutical company, Genentech. So I think one of the things that has been really valuable for us is both the mix of really top-level technologists along with industry experts to really combine the two, which I do think is one of the stumbling blocks with blockchain, is that it's not just technology, it's actually a cooperative structure, and bringing the companies together to utilize and benefit from this technology has been one of the things that's gone really well for us.
That's awesome. And that's the point about it being a cooperative structure. It really resonates. And it's not only bringing the right people to the table, but up front, figuring out governance and addressing some of those really hard questions about what this network is going to look like, how it's going to operate, and what are the goal outcomes for everyone involved. So, as a previous leader of a supply chain operation, you've seen technology stacks evolve over time. Can you point to a single moment or something that drove your interest in blockchain or DLT technologies and why you saw fit to found Chronicle?
Yeah, so in the United States, there's a law that was passed all the way back in 2013 that is requiring the pharmaceutical industry to not only put a unique serial number identifier on every box of medicine sold, but also is requiring the industry to be interoperable. By 2023, it states that there will be an electronic interoperable system to manage the track and trace of prescription medicine in the event of suspect product. There are also complementary laws in Europe and many other countries in the world. And I think this is just, I'll call it 21st century technology, finally catching up with how the pharmaceutical industry needs to operate and the security that can bring. And it was really that law and the industry's need to start figuring out how to be interoperable that happened at the exact time that this thing called blockchain was getting much more notice in the world. It was the first time I had heard of it. A lot of people in my network had pinged me to look into this blockchain thing. And that's where the journey started. So we had the gift of a regulation that brought major leading companies from the industry together. And the work we've done with them has grown as they've understood the benefits they can get by working together.
Susanne, so you were previously running an international supply chain operation. We mentioned the piece of U.S. legislation, the Drug Security Supply Chain Act. Were there also pieces of international legislation that drove your exploration of this technology?
Actually, it's interesting. The European regulation actually mandated a system of country and EU level databases. So they had already been off and running. Blockchain, I think, could still benefit what they're doing there, but the path to entry had already been sort of mandated in a different way, where FDA purposely has left interpretation of the law open, and they're really looking for the industry to solve the problem, which gave the opportunity for us to build our first solution to meet part of the law. That was a product verification solution. All drugs returned to a wholesaler were going to need to be verified before they could be resold. It represented 2% of all drugs sold in the United States. And we built a very elegant, decentralized solution run by companies and solution providers themselves that allows the manufacturers to put data about their products on the blockchain and allows the wholesalers or pharmacies to upload that, if you could imagine, industry phone book and route messages directly peer-to-peer to get the answers to those verification requests. It's a beautiful example. Unfortunately, that law now got delayed by an additional 3 years. And that is part of the dilemma, as we were going to talk about, is enterprise blockchain dead? That it's, fits and starts. It's hard to get people together. And then things like regulation put it back on the back burner for a couple more years. But the good news is we've demonstrated to the industry that the technology is ready, that solution is in production and running today, and can pass all their IT security requirements. So all that's left now is to figure out business problems that need to be solved and bring these companies together to do that.
I think we just hit upon another one of the major challenges and opportunities, this idea of co-opetition or collaborative competition, where you're bringing together fierce competitors to work together for an outcome that benefits everyone in industry more broadly. What's your experience been with the MediLedger product and co-opetition? What has worked in co-opetition and what is still a challenge?
So bringing the companies together really feels like it has been working. There are shared pain points. There are processes that every company does. They're not competitive processes. Collecting revenue doesn't make one pharmaceutical company more competitive than the other. So I think doing a lot of work and scrutiny on the use cases that can benefit all parties involved has been really helpful. That said, we still have points where companies get to a point, either in their business decision-making or in evaluation, that it still comes back to, I'm going to put myself first above all others. And so that tipping point still is hard to get people to continue with that cooperative mindset. You might have found 2 or 3 champions in the company, but now you're introducing all the other business components, the procurement group, maybe IT leads, business leads, and they may not have that same viewpoint. So I think it's a journey. And frankly, as there are more examples in industries that show how solutions can be set up and working, I think it will actually accelerate the adoption. People will realize what they're missing out on, and they'll figure out how to cooperate enough to get solutions going.
So I think that's another really nice segue. So real world solutions that are working. I think that has been, the biggest question that I encounter when I'm talking to C-suite executives about whether or not they need to invest time, resources, and the efforts of their technology professionals to explore how this technology can work for them and their customers. This piece of news had come out, claiming that enterprise blockchain was dead. There's certainly no shortage of people with opinions on that statement. What's your take?
So for sure, it is happening slower than people had expected. Blockchain has gone through a tremendous amount of hype. Everyone knows, and that hype is probably, 4 or 5 years in the making now. And it's definitely taken longer to bring to market. That said, as I noted, we have a product verification solution in production used by half of the top 20 pharma and the major wholesalers. And our contract and chargeback solution is now complete, and production transactions literally will be starting in the next few weeks. When I say complete, I'm talking integrations, testing, all the IT security review. It's a long journey in this industry. People don't take connecting core systems lightly, as been evidenced with the hacks across the industry. But I would say my plug for people to get involved is what we've seen is that just going through the example of a project makes you align a lot of questions that you didn't know you needed to ask. We've had companies that have had to revise their firewall policies, their DMZ policies, because they're going to be communicating in a different way now. And it's a journey, not just maybe with the business and procurement folks to get a contract done, but it's a journey of all the people along the way to understand the impact on their existing systems architecture and evaluate what might change in the future. Coming onto a project that's real and in production more than a POC, I value all the POC work that the industry has done. And to give credit to the pharmaceutical industry, a lot has been invested in gaining blockchain expertise and running POCs. But POCs often end up with an architecture that's actually not scalable and cannot grow to broader adoption. And so it really ends up having limits. So I'm obviously self-serving here, but coming on to projects that are in production and have been architected to really include the whole industry, I think is a valuable exercise for people to understand what the impact will be. Not only gain benefit from that solution today, but really think through the architecture for the future.
And talking about that technology transformation from the current state to the future state, how do you see DLT technology solving for traditional supply chain control tower and supply chain visibility challenges? So much of the world continues to run on mainframes and green screens and the EDIs, and the unidirectional nature of that information flow with EDIs is certainly shown itself to be challenging. 2020 certainly brought supply chain visibility into everyone's living room. Mm-hmm. What's this idea around industry networking 2.0 and what gets us there?
So Industry Network 2.0, I think, takes us from that EDI world or email world you described for exchanging data and transactions, which is literally just an electronic version of a fax. If we think back to the evolution of EDI, we want to take it one step further. We should be able, with today's technology, as we exchange data and transactions, to do live real-time business rule enforcement on that exchange of information, and to actually adjudicate and settle transactions real time. We know the rules. Why can't we actually put them in code and do that real time? Today, that settlement can take weeks for the chargeback process, if not longer, not to mention dispute management. So we've now set up the technology that can allow this all to happen real time. We'll be demonstrating the replacement of a couple of EDI messages with more on the horizon. And when we talk to companies, it's interesting. We can certainly focus on the business value that they can get, but then real basic stuff like EDI pain points keep coming up as well. So if anything, the breadth of business value that's going to come, better, more accurate data, real-time data, knowing you're looking at the exact same data as your trading partner, and EDI. And what's also, I think, really exciting for us, Chronicled is focused from the beginning with a blockchain ethos. And this is probably a little bit of a problem to address your transparency question. I think there's been a lot of people with a blockchain ethos that think everything should be open, all data should be available to everyone. Well, there's a lot of data about where drugs are that has business value to people. It might reveal who their suppliers are, and they don't want their customers to go around them to their suppliers. So being really thoughtful, as much as it's a dreamy idea, but full transparency to everyone is not a realistic outcome for businesses to participate in. But how can we make the right information available to the right parties? And if nothing else, the validation that things are done in real time. So that's our vision for Industry Network 2.0. And I think our solutions are showing a really exciting example of that. But we also have to weigh how businesses want to participate in that transparency question. We can provide transparency, or we can, I'll say this better, we can give the right information to the people who really need it, right? People still today, the way they operate are like, give me all this data so I know what's happening and I can analyze it, when actually all they may want to know is it coming or is it not coming? And they don't need to know the details of the transaction. But it's something to work through, and probably companies are going to have different viewpoints. And again, it'll be a different journey on how to get there.
And as we think through how we get there, you mentioned, regulatory and legislative impetus for projects. Do you think it's going to be a regulation or legislation-driven catalyst to see more widespread or ecosystem level adoption of this technology in supply chains broadly? Or do you think it's going to be the adoption of this technology by industry heavyweights, those that control a meaningful amount of transportation volume or transportation spend volume, that's going to really move this forward?
If I look at the last 4 years, I'm going to guess it's going to be a little piece of all of the above. Certainly, some regulations and industries will absolutely drive companies coming together, as we saw for the US industry. And that will be an impetus to get some on the table. It already has. We certainly have examples of IBM's Food Trust and Maersk, bringing solutions that maybe have had slower adoption than they initially had hoped, but is again setting an example of what's possible for folks to utilize. Our contract and chargeback process is none of the above. It's really the industry leaders asking us to solve a shared pain point. It's an ROI use case. It's not regulation. But again, I think the more and more people see real use cases in ways that they understand how it's being used, it will absolutely immediately start others in other industries seeing what's possible, and will drive that impetus and grow from there. And I do think that's been part of the slow work. I think I mentioned it earlier. So many people had technology and went to talk to maybe one or two companies. And really what we have found is it's the combination of both the technology and the social engineering that's necessary to bring the critical mass to really have enough voices at the table that you've designed a protocol that is valuable to all companies in the industry. And that's been our aim since the beginning.
You bring up a great point around real world use cases. And that's something I'm really excited about at BiTA this year is we're pushing into building out a reference architecture around some really exciting, potentially cross-border and multi-transport mode use cases. I'd encourage everybody to get involved and check out our work at bita.studio. How can people learn more about Chronicled and how can they get involved?
Yeah. So again, we've got production solutions that are available. So even if you maybe aren't an early adopter, it's still a great time right now to contact us, and we can demonstrate for pharmaceutical companies and wholesalers and hospital groups and GPOs the value proposition we think this can bring. And similar to what I said before, we also have companies that recognize getting in there and participating is where a lot of the lessons are going to come from. So there's been a lot of work not to dissuade folks from hiring consulting practices, but getting in on a real solution and doing a real implementation provides a huge set of lessons learned. And that time is now. So we'd be thrilled to talk to people. And if they have new use case ideas that could benefit multi-company, cross-trading partner automation and real-time settlement, that's the sweet spot. And I think that's the thing, as we hear from other people, we'll definitely kick off new work groups and to solve those new problems.
Awesome. Well, Susanne, thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with us and sharing with us stories of success and for painting the picture around the actual state of enterprise DLT technology adoption. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the FreightWaves Health and Pharma Supply Chain Summit.
Thanks so much.